The shuttle's engines hummed quietly as it approached the massive space station floating in the void between three suns. Zara Chen pressed her face against the small window, watching the Galactic Academy grow larger with each passing moment. The station was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, with gleaming metal towers stretching in all directions like the branches of some impossible tree. She touched the simple silver mask covering the upper half of her face. The medical excuse she'd given was real enough, battle scars from a training accident, she'd told them. The truth was far more complicated. Her face was known across 17 star systems as the ghost of Kepler Station, the human who had single-handedly held off an entire Vorthak invasion fleet while civilians evacuated. That was 3 years ago. She'd been 19 then. A junior officer who'd somehow found herself as the last line of defense when everything went wrong. The Vorthaks had expected easy prey. Humans were still considered a minor species, barely worth notice in the grand scheme of galactic politics. They hadn't expected someone like her. Now, at 22, Zara was tired of being a symbol. The medals felt heavy in her trunk, packed away beneath civilian clothes and textbooks. She wanted something different, something normal. The Galactic Academy offered that chance, a place where beings from hundreds of worlds came to study together, to learn about each other's cultures and sciences. The docking bay was chaos when she finally disembarked. Students of every imaginable species moved through the corridors like a living river of diversity. She saw the tall, crystalline Zephyrians with their musical voices, the stocky grim miners with their stone-like skin, and dozens of others she couldn't immediately identify. "Excuse me, are you lost?" The voice belonged to a Calarian, one of the reptilian species known for their excellent memory and scholarly traditions. His scales were a deep blue-green, and his large eyes showed genuine concern. "I'm looking for the dormitory assignments," Zara said, grateful for the mask that hid her expression. Even her voice had been altered slightly by a small device in her throat, another precaution to keep her identity hidden. "Ah, a new student. I'm Thexka, but you can call me Thex. I'm in my 3rd year studying comparative military history." His enthusiasm was infectious, and Zara found herself relaxing slightly. "I'm Zara, 1st year xenobiology major." Thex's eyes lit up. "Fascinating field. You must be quite brave to choose such a challenging course of study. Come, I'll show you to the dormitory office." As they walked through the corridors, Thex pointed out various landmarks and explained the academy's structure. The station was divided into academic sectors, each designed to accommodate different species' needs. There were water-filled areas for aquatic beings, high-gravity zones for the heavier world species, and atmospheric chambers with dozens of different gas mixtures. The academy was founded on the principle that knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied, Thex explained as they passed a group of gaseous ethereals communicating through color changes. Every species brings something unique to the table. Humans, for instance, have this remarkable ability to adapt and improvise. Very useful in crisis situations, I'm told. Zara nearly stumbled. "What do you mean?" "Well, there was that incident at Kepler Station a few years ago. A human officer, they called her the Ghost, I think, managed to hold off an entire Vorthak fleet, using nothing but mining equipment and cargo ships. Absolutely brilliant tactical thinking. The Academy actually added her battle plans to our required reading in advanced strategic studies." Heat flooded Zara's cheeks beneath her mask. She'd had no idea her improvised, desperate last stand had become a teaching example. "I see. Of course, no one knows what happened to her afterward. Some say she retired, others think she went into deep space exploration. Personally, I hope she found peace. War changes people, especially when you're forced to make the kind of choices she had to make." They reached the dormitory office, where a helpful Centaurian administrator, looking like a cross between a horse and a diplomat, assigned Zara to a shared apartment in Sector 7. Her roommate, she learned, was another first-year student named Kira Mendez, a human from the outer colonies. The apartment was small but comfortable, with adjustable gravity and atmosphere controls to accommodate different species. Kira wasn't there when Zara arrived, so she had time to unpack her few belongings and set up her personal space. She hid the medals deep in her closet, behind spare clothes and study materials. Her first classes began the next morning. Xenobiology proved to be exactly what she'd hoped for: complex, challenging, and completely removed from anything military. Professor Yantar, an ancient crystalline being whose body resembled living diamond, conducted the class through harmonic vibrations that were translated into various languages by the Academy's systems. Life, Professor Yantar intoned, his crystalline form refracting the classroom lights into rainbow patterns, adapts to every conceivable environment. Today we will examine the biological adaptations that allow different species to thrive in conditions that would be lethal to others. Zara threw herself into the coursework with enthusiasm she hadn't felt in years. Here, she wasn't a war hero or a symbol of human resistance. She was just another student trying to understand the incredible diversity of life in the galaxy. Her roommate Kira turned out to be friendly and chatty, full of questions about Earth cultures and human history. She was studying interspecies communication, hoping to become a translator for diplomatic missions. "I've never met anyone who wears a mask before," Kira said one evening, as they shared dinner in their apartment. "Is it a cultural thing from your colony?" Zara had prepared for this question. "Medical condition. I was in an accident during my mandatory service period. The scars are extensive." "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry." Kira's expression was genuinely apologetic. "For what it's worth, I think masks can be pretty stylish. You've got this whole mysterious scholar thing going on." Life at the Academy quickly fell into a comfortable routine. Zara attended lectures, studied in the vast library that occupied 3 entire levels of the station, and slowly began to make friends among her classmates. There was Vex, a young Vorthak who was studying human literature and seemed completely fascinated by Earth poetry. The irony wasn't lost on Zara that she was becoming friends with a member of the same species she'd fought so desperately against. There was also Nim, a ethereal whose gaseous form allowed her to see electromagnetic spectrums invisible to most other beings. She was working on a project to map the energy patterns of different emotional states across species, something that could revolutionize interspecies psychology. "Humans have very interesting emotional signatures," Neem told Zara one day as they worked together in the biology lab. Her gaseous form shifted through shades of blue and gold as she spoke. "Very intense, very focused. Most species show more diffuse patterns, but humans seem to channel their emotions with remarkable precision." "What do you mean by precision?" Zara asked, carefully adjusting the microscope they were sharing to examine samples from a methane-breathing microorganism. "Well, when most beings experience fear or anger, the energy spreads throughout their entire system. Humans, though, they can take those same emotions and focus them into incredibly specific responses. It's how you manage to perform so well under pressure." Zara's hands stilled on the microscope controls. "You can see that in my emotional signature?" "Oh yes, very clearly. You have one of the most controlled patterns I've ever observed, almost military in its discipline." Nim's form swirled thoughtfully. "You must have excellent self-control." That night, Zara lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her small bedroom. Even here, thousands of light years from any battlefield, she couldn't completely escape what she'd been. Her training, her experiences, her very way of thinking, it all marked her as clearly as any uniform. 2 months into her first semester, everything changed during what should have been a routine field trip. Professor Yantar had arranged for the xenobiology class to visit a research station orbiting a gas giant in the next system. The station was studying extremophile organisms that lived in the planet's upper atmosphere, creatures that survived in conditions no one had thought possible. The research station was small, staffed by only a dozen scientists from various species. Dr. Helms, the human director, welcomed the student group enthusiastically. He was an elderly man with wild white hair and the kind of excitement that came from spending years studying things nobody else understood. "These organisms challenge everything we thought we knew about the limits of life," he explained as he led them through the station's observation deck. Through the massive windows, they could see the swirling clouds of the gas giant below, painted in impossible shades of orange and purple. "They don't just survive in the methane storms down there," Dr. Helms continued. "They thrive. They've developed biological processes that actually feed on the electromagnetic discharges from the lightning. It's like they're living batteries." Zara found herself genuinely fascinated. This was exactly the kind of discovery that had drawn her to xenobiology, proof that life was far more adaptable and creative than anyone had imagined. The tour continued through the station's laboratories, where samples of the atmospheric organisms were being studied in carefully controlled environments. Professor Yantar asked detailed questions about the creature's cellular structure, while other students took notes and recorded everything with their personal devices. They were in the main lab when the first alarm sounded. The tone was sharp and urgent, cutting through all conversation. Dr. Helms frowned and moved to a communication panel. "Station Control, this is Dr. Helms. What's the nature of the emergency?" The response crackled through the speakers with obvious stress. "Dr. Helms, we're detecting multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Configuration unknown, but they're not responding to hails." Zara's blood went cold. She knew that particular combination of alarm tones, knew what it meant when unknown ships appeared without warning. Her hand moved instinctively to where her sidearm would have been, finding only empty air. Through the observation windows, she could see them now. Dark shapes moving against the star field, their hulls reflecting no light. Even at this distance, she recognized the sleek, predatory design. Raiders. Not Vortex this time, but something almost worse. Pirates who specialized in hitting isolated research stations and remote outposts. They took what they wanted and left no witnesses. Professor Yantar's crystalline form was vibrating at a frequency that indicated severe distress. The other students clustered together, their various species' fear responses creating a cacophony of sounds and colors. "Students, please remain calm," Dr. Helms said, but his voice betrayed his own anxiety. "We're following emergency protocols. Station security is—" The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in red light that made the laboratory look like something from a nightmare. Through the windows, Zara could see bright flashes as the raiders disabled the station's communications array and defensive systems. "The security team," Dr. Helms said into his communicator. "Report status." Static answered him. Zara knew what that meant, too. A research station like this would have maybe 4 or 5 security officers armed with basic defensive weapons. Against a full raider crew with military-grade equipment, they wouldn't have lasted long. The other students were beginning to panic. Vex, the young Vorthak, was making distressed clicking sounds. Nim's gaseous form had turned a deep, fearful purple. Even Thex, usually so composed, was clearly struggling to maintain his calm. "What do we do?" Kira whispered, her face pale in the emergency lighting. Dr. Helms was frantically working at his console, trying to establish communication with anyone who might help. "I'm sending out a distress signal, but the nearest patrol ship is at least 6 hours away." 6 hours. They had maybe 6 minutes before the raiders breached the station's hull and came looking for anything valuable, including hostages they could ransom or sell. Zara felt something cold and familiar settling into her chest. The same feeling she'd had 3 years ago when she'd realized she was all that stood between 1,000 civilians and certain death. She'd hoped never to feel it again. But here it was. She looked around the laboratory, taking inventory with eyes trained to see tactical possibilities in any environment. The station's defensive systems were down, but there were other things. Emergency blast doors, atmospheric controls, the station's own gravity and life support systems. "Dr. Helms," she said quietly, stepping closer to the older man. "How many raiders are there?" He looked at her strangely. "The sensors detected 3 ships before they went offline, maybe 30 to 40 crew members total. Why?" 40 raiders. Armed, experienced, and expecting easy prey. Zara closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the choice in front of her. She could stay hidden behind her mask and her false identity, hope that someone else would find a solution. Let whatever happened, happen. Or she could do what she'd always done when innocent people were in danger. She opened her eyes and began to plan. "I need you to tell me everything about this station's systems," she said to Dr. Helms. "Emergency procedures, backup power, internal security protocols, everything." "I don't understand. You're just a student." "Dr. Helms." Her voice carried an authority that made everyone in the room turn to look at her. "Right now, I'm the only chance any of us have of surviving the next hour. So please tell me about the station." The mask hid her face. But nothing could hide the steel in her voice or the way she moved as she began to study the station's layout on Dr. Helms's console. For the first time in 3 years, the ghost of Kepler Station was back. Dr. Helms stared at Zara for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. His fingers flew across the console, bringing up the station's complete schematic. "The research station has 4 main levels. We're currently on level 2. Life support and main power are on level 4, the bottom. Docking bays are on level 1, and the command center is on level 3. Zara studied the layout with the eye of someone who had spent years turning impossible situations into survivable ones. The station was small, but that could work in their favor. Fewer places for the raiders to spread out, more opportunities to control the flow of movement. "Emergency protocols?" she asked. "Blast doors can seal off any section independently. We have emergency atmospheric controls that can flood individual areas with different gas mixtures. Originally designed to accommodate different species' needs, but they could be adapted." Dr. Helms paused. "There's also the gravity generator. It can be adjusted section by section." Perfect. Zara began to see the shape of a plan forming. "Students," she said, turning to address the group. They were all watching her with a mixture of confusion and growing hope. "I need you to listen carefully. We're going to split into 2 groups. Professor Yantar, I need you to take half the students to the emergency shelter on level 4. There should be communication equipment there that the raiders might not have found yet." Professor Yantar's crystalline form pulsed with uncertainty. "What about the other half?" "They're coming with me. We're going to buy you time to get a message out." Zara looked around the group, her gaze settling on specific faces. "Thex, Vex, Nim, Kira, you're with me. Everyone else go with the professor." "Wait," Thex said, his reptilian features showing concern. "What exactly are you planning? You're a xenobiology student, not a security officer." Zara almost smiled behind her mask. If only he knew. "I have some experience with crisis situations. Right now, that experience is the only advantage we have." Before anyone could ask more questions, she turned back to Dr. Helms. "I need access to the station's environmental controls. All of them." Dr. Helms hesitated for only a moment before transferring command access to a portable tablet. These systems weren't designed for combat situations. "Everything can be weaponized if you're creative enough," Zara said, accepting the tablet. The weight of it felt familiar, like holding a tactical command unit. Dr. Helms, go with Professor Yantar. Try to reach the academy, or better yet, contact the nearest military patrol. Through the observation windows, they could see lights moving near the station's docking bays. The raiders were already aboard. Move, Zara ordered quietly. Stay quiet. Use the service corridors when possible, and remember, your only job is to get to that shelter and call for help. Everything else is secondary. Professor Yantar gathered the remaining students and headed for the emergency exit. Dr. Helms lingered for a moment, looking at Zara with an expression of growing realization. I don't know who you are, he said quietly, but thank you. After they left, Zara turned to her remaining companions. 4 students who had volunteered to follow her into danger without really understanding what they were agreeing to. Before we begin, she said carefully, I need you to understand something. What we're about to do is dangerous. Very dangerous. If anyone wants to change their minds and go with the others, now is the time. None of them moved. All right then. Zara pulled up the station schematic on the tablet. Here's what we're going to do. The first step was reconnaissance. Using the station's internal sensor network, Zara tracked the raiders' movement through the corridors. 43 individuals, all armed with standard military weapons and wearing powered armor. They were moving in standard search patterns, clearing each section methodically. Professional, but not military. Raiders learned to be thorough, but they also learned to take shortcuts when they thought their prey was helpless. They'll hit the command center first, Zara explained to the others as they moved through a maintenance tunnel toward level 3. They want to control communications and make sure no one can lock them out of critical systems. After that, they'll start hunting for anything valuable. Including us, Vex said. His Vorthak physiology was naturally suited for combat, but he was young and had clearly never been in a real fight. Especially us, Zara confirmed. Students from the academy would be worth a fortune on the slave markets. But that's not going to happen. They reached an access panel that opened near the command center. Zara carefully pulled up the live sensor feed and studied the raider positions. 6 of them in the command center itself, another 8 spread through level 3 as security. Nim, Zara said quietly, I need you to do something that might be dangerous. Can your gaseous form fit through the station's ventilation system? Nim's ethereal body swirled nervously. Yes, but why? I need you to get to the environmental control junction on this level. There's a manual override that will let us flood specific sections with different atmospheric mixtures. When I give the signal, I need you to fill the command center with a heavy nitrogen-argon mix. That would suffocate most oxygen-breathing species, Nim said, her form shifting to a worried yellow. That's the point. Can you do it? Nim hesitated, then firmed into a more confident blue. Yes. Good. Thex, you and Vex are going to help me with a distraction. Kira, I need you to get to the nearest internal communication station and be ready to coordinate. They separated, each heading to their assigned position. Zara made her way to a maintenance station that gave her access to the station's gravity controls. The tablet in her hands felt warm from constant use as she began to reprogram the gravitational fields. Raiders expected resistance, but they expected it from security forces or desperate civilians making heroic last stands. They didn't expect someone who understood that a space station was itself a weapon if you knew how to use it. The first phase began with gravity. Zara waited until the raiders were fully committed to searching the command center, then gradually increased the gravitational pull in that section to 3 times normal. She heard the distant sounds of confusion and alarm as the raiders suddenly found themselves struggling to move under the unexpected weight. Now, Nim, she whispered into her communicator. The atmospheric change was invisible, but immediate. Within minutes, the raiders in the command center would be unconscious from oxygen deprivation. Their powered armor would keep them alive, but they'd be out of the fight. Phase 1 complete, Kira's voice crackled through the comm. 6 tangos down in the command center. But the raiders weren't stupid. The remaining forces quickly realized they were under attack and began moving with much more caution. Worse, they started splitting into smaller groups, making them harder to trap. New plan, Zara told the others. They're adapting faster than I hoped. Time for something more direct. She made her way to a supply closet that, according to the station schematics, contained emergency equipment. What she found was exactly what she'd hoped for: emergency atmospheric suits, emergency tools, and most importantly, emergency charges used for blowing out damaged hull sections. Not weapons exactly, but in the right hands, anything could be a weapon. Vex, I need you to cause a distraction on level 1, something loud and obvious that will draw most of the raiders away from the central areas. What kind of distraction? Vex asked. Set off the fire suppression system in the main corridor. The alarms will make them think there's been a system failure or maybe an explosion. Most of them will go to investigate. While her friends carried out the distraction, Zara began her own hunt. She moved through the station like a shadow, using service tunnels and maintenance shafts to avoid detection. The emergency charges were small but powerful, designed to blast through reinforced hull plating in case of emergency repairs. She placed the first charge in a corridor junction that the raiders would have to pass through to reach level 4. Not enough to seriously damage the station, but enough to seal off that route and force them to take a longer path. The second charge went near the main power distribution panel. If things went badly, she could cut power to most of the station and force a fight in the dark, an environment where her experience would give her an even bigger advantage. Zara, Kira's voice came through the comm, tight with worry. I'm reading movement toward level 4. They're heading for the shelter. Zara's blood went cold. Professor Yantar and the other students would be helpless if the raiders reached them before help arrived. How many? Looks like 12, moving in formation. They know exactly where they're going. Someone had talked, or the raiders had found the station's emergency protocols in the computer system. Either way, innocent people were about to die unless she did something. All units, new priority, she said into the comm. We need to stop that group from reaching level 4. Everything else is secondary. She was 3 levels away from the threat, with no direct route and limited equipment. A month ago, this would have seemed impossible. But a month ago, she hadn't been the ghost of Kepler Station. Zara began to run. The first group of raiders she encountered was moving through a maintenance corridor, clearly trying to avoid the main routes where they might trigger more traps. 3 of them armed with pulse rifles and moving with professional coordination. Under normal circumstances, a xenobiology student would have hidden or tried to sneak past. But these weren't normal circumstances, and Zara had stopped being just a student the moment innocent lives were threatened. She triggered one of her emergency charges in the corridor behind them, cutting off their retreat. The explosion also disabled the lights, plunging the area into darkness. Night vision was standard in most military equipment, but it took a few seconds to activate. A few seconds was all Zara needed. She moved through the darkness like she was born to it, using sound and movement to track her enemies. The first raider went down when she used an emergency tool to short out his armor's power supply. The second fell when she triggered a gravity field that slammed him into the ceiling hard enough to knock him unconscious. The third raider managed to get his weapon up, but by then Zara was already inside his guard. Years of close combat training took over, and the fight was over in seconds. 3 down, she reported, already moving toward the next group. Zara, that was incredible. Thex's voice came through the comm. How did you— Not now, she interrupted. Status on the group heading for level 4. Still moving, Kira reported. But they've slowed down. I think the explosion spooked them. Good. Confused enemies made mistakes. Zara reached the main stairwell leading to level 4, just as the raiders were beginning their descent. 12 of them, moving in tight formation with overlapping fields of fire. Professional, experienced, and heavily armed. A month ago, she would have called this suicide. Today, she called it Tuesday. The gravity controls in the stairwell gave her the opening she needed. As the raiders moved down the stairs, she gradually increased the gravitational pull, making each step harder than the last. By the time they realized what was happening, they were struggling to move at all. Then she cut the lights and triggered every emergency alarm in the section. In the chaos that followed, with raiders struggling against crushing gravity and unable to see or hear properly, Zara moved among them like a force of nature. She disabled armor, triggered emergency foam dispensers that trapped several raiders in hardening polymer, and used the station's own systems to turn their advantages against them. When the lights came back on, 11 raiders were unconscious or trapped. The 12th was running back up the stairs as fast as his legs could carry him. "Level 4 is secure," Zara reported, breathing hard. "Threat eliminated." "Zara," Nim's voice came through the comm, filled with awe. "Your emotional signature right now, I've never seen anything like it. It's like you're perfectly calm and completely focused at the same time." Zara almost laughed. If Nim could see the emotional signatures of the raiders she'd just taken down, she'd probably see pure terror. "Status report," she said instead. "How many hostiles are still active?" "Looks like maybe 20, Kira answered. "But they're regrouping near the docking bay. I think they're getting ready to cut their losses and run." That was both good news and bad news. Good because it meant the immediate threat was ending. Bad because it meant they might take hostages to ensure their escape. "Understood. All units, maintain positions and stay hidden. Let them leave." "Shouldn't we try to capture them?" Vex asked. "No. Our job was to protect the civilians and buy time for help to arrive. We've done that. Don't turn victory into defeat by overreaching." It was a hard lesson she'd learned years ago. Sometimes the best tactical decision was to let the enemy withdraw rather than risk everything on a final confrontation. 20 minutes later, the raider ships detached from the station and disappeared into hyperspace. They left behind damaged systems and 23 unconscious crew members, but no casualties among the station personnel or students. Professor Yantar and the other students emerged from the shelter to find the crisis over, and their masked classmates sitting quietly in the station's main corridor, looking like she'd just finished a routine homework assignment. "The rescue ships should be here within the hour," Dr. Helms reported, his voice filled with amazement. "How did you... what just happened here?" Zara looked up at the gathering crowd of students and staff, all of them staring at her with expressions ranging from awe to confusion to growing suspicion. Behind her mask, she wondered how long she could keep her secret now. Some things couldn't be explained away by claiming to have read about tactics in textbooks. "We worked together," she said simply. "Everyone did their part." But she could see the questions forming in their eyes, and she knew that her time as just another student was running out. The rescue ships arrived exactly 57 minutes later, but by then the questions had already begun. Academy security officers, galactic patrol investigators, and even a few military intelligence officials wanted to know how a group of first-year students had managed to defeat a professional raider crew. Zara sat in the station's main conference room, still wearing her mask, and tried to answer their questions without revealing too much. Yes, she had some experience with crisis situations from her mandatory service period. No, she couldn't explain exactly how she'd known what to do. It had been mostly improvisation and luck. The investigators weren't entirely convinced, but they had no choice but to accept her story. After all, she was just a xenobiology student who happened to be good under pressure, but her friends weren't as easy to fool. "Zara, we need to talk," Thex said as they boarded the shuttle back to the academy. His reptilian features showed concern mixed with growing suspicion. "What you did back there, that wasn't luck or improvisation." "I don't know what you mean," Zara replied, but she could hear how weak it sounded even to herself. "Your emotional patterns during the crisis, Nim added, her gaseous form swirling anxiously. They weren't like a civilian in danger. They were like someone who had done this before, many times. Vex nodded agreement. The way you moved, the way you gave orders, the way you knew exactly how to use the station's systems as weapons, that was professional military training. Kira was quiet for a long moment before speaking. Zara, are you really just a student? The question hung in the air between them. Zara looked at her friends, beings from different worlds who had trusted her completely when it mattered most. They deserved better than lies, but the truth was dangerous, not just for her, but potentially for them as well. It's complicated, she said finally. We have time, Thex said gently. We're your friends, Zara. Whatever it is, we can handle it. Zara closed her eyes behind her mask, feeling the weight of 3 years of secrecy pressing down on her. She'd come to the academy to escape her past, to be normal. But events had proven that she couldn't run from what she was. Maybe it was time to stop trying. Not here, she said quietly. When we get back to the academy, come to my apartment, all of you, and I'll tell you everything. The flight back to the academy passed in tense silence. Zara stared out the viewport at the stars, wondering if she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. Her secret had protected her, given her the chance to be just another student. Once it was out, everything would change, but keeping it had nearly gotten people killed. If she'd acted faster, been willing to reveal her ability sooner, the crisis might never have escalated as far as it did. That evening, her 4 friends gathered in the small living area of her apartment. Kira sat on the couch. Thex occupied a chair designed for his physiology. Vex stood near the window, and Nim hovered in her preferred corner, her gaseous form cycling through nervous colors. Zara stood in the center of the room, still wearing her mask. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for the simple silver clasp that held it in place. Before I show you this, she said quietly, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to share with you could put you all in danger. There are people who would do anything to get information about me, and knowing my identity makes you targets. We understand, Thex said solemnly. We're still here. Zara took a deep breath and removed her mask. The scars weren't as bad as she'd led them to believe. A few small marks along her cheekbone and forehead, the kind that came from flying debris in a combat situation, but her face was whole, recognizable. More importantly, it was a face that had been on news broadcasts across dozens of star systems. Kira gasped. You're her. You're the ghost of Kepler Station. Nim's form suddenly flared bright gold with shock. The human who held off the entire Vorthak invasion fleet, the one who saved 10,000 civilians. Vex made a strangled sound that might have been laughter or amazement. I've been reading poetry to the most famous military hero in recent galactic history. I'm not a hero, Zara said quickly, sitting down heavily in her chair. I was just the only one left. Someone had to do something. Tell us what really happened, Thex said gently. We only know the official reports. So Zara told them. Not the sanitized version that had appeared in the military records, but the real story. How she'd been a junior officer on a routine patrol when the Vorthak fleet had appeared without warning. How the civilian evacuation ships had been caught in the system with nowhere to go. How the senior officers had been killed in the first wave of attacks, leaving her in command of a mining station's worth of improvised defenses. I had 6 cargo haulers, a dozen mining drones, and about 50 civilians who refused to evacuate without their families, she said, staring at her hands. The Vorthaks had 47 warships. How did you do it? Vex asked quietly. I cheated. Zara almost smiled at the memory. The Vorthaks expected a military response. They were prepared for warships and tactics they understood. They weren't prepared for someone who turned the entire mining operation into a weapon. She'd used the mining charges to create artificial asteroid fields. She'd reprogrammed the cargo haulers to ram Vorthak ships at critical moments. She'd even convinced the Vorthaks that the mining station was actually a heavily fortified military base by constantly moving the drones to simulate weapon emplacements. "For 18 hours, I made 47 warships believe they were fighting a fortress," she said. By the time they realized the truth, the evacuation was complete and reinforcements had arrived. "And then?" Nim asked. "And then I discovered that being famous is worse than being dead," Zara said bitterly. "Everyone wanted a piece of the ghost. The military wanted me to become the poster girl for human capabilities. Politicians wanted to use me as a symbol. The media wanted to turn me into some kind of superhero." She'd tried to go back to normal duty, but it was impossible. Every mission became about proving that humans were more capable than other species believed. Every decision was scrutinized by superiors who expected miracles. Every failure was seen as evidence that the legend was false. "So I left," she said simply. "Faked medical retirement, changed my identity, and came here hoping to disappear." "But you couldn't," Thex observed. "When people were in danger, you became the ghost again." "I tried not to. For 3 years, I tried to be normal. But when I saw those raiders..." Zara shrugged helplessly. "I couldn't just stand by and watch innocent people get hurt." They sat in silence for several minutes, processing what they'd learned. Finally, Kira spoke up. "So what happens now? Are you going to disappear again?" Zara had been asking herself the same question. The rescue operation had been too public, too visible. By tomorrow, investigators would be comparing security footage with old military records. Someone would make the connection. "I don't know," she admitted. "I wanted to finish my degree, maybe become a researcher, but that might not be possible now." "Why not?" Vex asked. "You saved everyone on that station. Doesn't that earn you the right to choose your own life?" "It's not that simple. Once word gets out that the ghost of Kepler Station is at the academy, this place will become a circus. Media, military recruiters, politicians, they'll all want access, and that will put everyone here at risk." Nim's form shifted to a determined orange. "What if there was a way to prevent that?" Zara looked at her curiously. "What do you mean? What if the ghost of Kepler Station officially died at the research station?" Nim's gaseous form swirled with excitement. "What if the official report said that a heroic student named Zara Chen sacrificed herself to save the others?" That's actually not a bad idea," Thex said slowly. "If everyone believes you're dead, they'll stop looking for you." "But the investigators already have my real identity," Zara pointed out. "Do they?" Kira asked. "Or do they have the identity of a student named Zara Chen who happened to have some military training? The medical records supporting your current identity are real, aren't they?" Zara nodded. The surgery to alter her appearance slightly had been real, as had the documented therapy for post-traumatic stress. It would take a very thorough investigation to connect her current identity to her previous one. "We could make it work," Vex said with growing enthusiasm. "If we all stick to the same story, if we provide just enough details to satisfy the investigators without revealing too much." "You'd do that for me?" Zara asked, amazed. "You risked everything to save people you barely knew," Thex said firmly. "Of course we'd help protect your secret." Over the next hour, they worked out the details of their plan. The official story would be that Zara Chen had displayed remarkable courage and tactical thinking during the crisis, drawing on training from her mandatory service period. She'd been injured during the final confrontation with the raiders and died from her wounds shortly after the rescue ships arrived. The investigators would find evidence of a promising young student who had sacrificed herself for others. They might wonder about her unusual capabilities, but without a living subject to examine, they'd have no choice but to accept the official record. Meanwhile, the real Zara would assume a new identity, documentation that Kira's connections in the diplomatic corps could help provide. She'd continue her studies under a different name, in a different field perhaps, but she'd have the chance to live the normal life she'd always wanted. "There's just one problem," Zara said as they finalized the details. "What about you four? Once I'm supposedly dead, you won't be able to contact me anymore. Our friendship would have to end." Her friends exchanged glances, and Nim spoke for all of them. "Who says our friendship has to end? So what if we become friends with someone new who happens to look a lot like our old friend? These things happen." Zara felt tears threatening for the first time in years. She'd spent so long believing that her past made real relationships impossible that she'd have to choose between her identity and her connections to others. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked quietly. "Because you're our friend," Thex said simply. "Because everyone deserves the chance to choose their own path. And because maybe, someday when you're ready, the galaxy could use the Ghost of Kepler station again. But this time, it should be your choice." The plan went into effect the next morning. The Academy's medical bay issued a death certificate for Zara Chen, listing complications from injuries sustained during heroic actions against raiders. A small memorial service was held, attended by her friends and several faculty members who had been impressed by her brief time as a student. Meanwhile, a new student named Elena Vasquez enrolled in the Academy's comparative literature program. She was quiet, studious, and seemed to have a particular interest in heroic narratives from different cultures. Her friends, a Calarian studying military history, a young Vorthak poet, an ethereal psychologist, and a human translator, were happy to help her settle in. Elena didn't wear a mask, but she did tend to keep to herself. She was working on a thesis about how different species conceptualized heroism and sacrifice. Her advisor noted that she seemed to have an unusually deep understanding of the psychological costs of being placed in impossible situations. Sometimes, when there was a crisis on the station, a minor emergency, a medical situation, anything requiring quick thinking and decisive action, Elena would quietly step forward to help. She never took credit, never drew attention to herself, but somehow situations always seemed to resolve themselves when she was involved. Her friends noticed that she had nightmares sometimes, and that she would spend long hours staring out at the stars as if remembering something far away. But she was happy in a way she hadn't been when they first met her, and that was what mattered. The galaxy continued to spin, and life at the Academy went on. Students came and went, learning from each other and growing into the next generation of galactic citizens. In the comparative literature section of the vast library, a particular thesis about heroic narratives was slowly taking shape, a work that would eventually be published and studied across dozens of star systems. Its central argument was that true heroism wasn't about being famous or recognized, but about making the choice to help others even when no one would ever know what you'd done. The author was listed as Elena Vasquez, a promising graduate student who preferred to let her work speak for itself. But sometimes, late at night when the Academy was quiet and the stars seemed especially bright, Elena would stand at the observation deck and remember what it felt like to be someone else. Someone who had saved 10,000 lives and held off an impossible enemy through nothing but determination and refusal to give up. She'd remember and she'd smile and she'd go back to her normal life knowing that the galaxy was a little bit safer because the Ghost of Kepler station was still out there, watching, waiting, ready to help when help was needed most, just not in the way anyone expected.